Have you ever wondered what it takes to turn a single moment of kindness into a life-changing journey? Picture this, a rainy morning in Manhattan, a young woman running late for the most important interview of her life, and a stranger collapsing on the street. What happens next will take her from the brink of failure to the heights of success, and lead her straight into the arms of the last person she ever expected. This is a story about choices, courage, and the power of doing what's right, even when it seems impossible. It was one of those mornings in New York City that made you question why anyone ever left their apartment. Rain fell in a cold drizzle, soaking through Emma Carter's thin coat as she hurried down the sidewalk. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement, each step splashing water onto her already damp stockings. She tugged at her scarf, trying to shield herself from the biting wind, but it didn't help much. Emma glanced at her watch for what felt like the 100th time that morning, 8:47 a.m. She had exactly 13 minutes to get to Thorne Enterprises, 20 blocks away, for the most important job interview of her life. This wasn't just any job, it was her chance to finally break into the world of corporate finance after years of scraping by with part-time gigs and late-night studying. If she blew this opportunity, she'd be stuck working dead-end jobs forever. She raised her hand again, hoping to hail a taxi, but they all seemed to have invisible, "Not today," signs plastered on their windshields. Every cab that passed either ignored her or screeched off with someone else inside. Frustration bubbled up inside her chest. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, waving her arm more frantically now. Finally, a yellow cab slowed down near the curb. Relief washed over her face as she stepped forward, but then something caught her eye. Out of the corner of her vision, she saw a man stumble and collapse near a lamppost a few feet away. He clutched his chest, gasping for air, his face pale and clammy. Emma froze, torn between two instincts pulling her in opposite directions. On one side, there was the ticking clock, the relentless pressure of being late for the interview that could change everything. On the other, there was the man who clearly needed help, and fast. Her heart pounded as she hesitated, glancing back and forth between the cab and the stranger. Passers-by barely gave him a second look, some stepping around him without even slowing down. It was almost surreal how indifferent everyone seemed. "No," Emma whispered to herself, shaking her head. She couldn't just walk away. With a deep breath, she turned toward the man, leaving the waiting taxi behind. Kneeling beside him, she gently tapped his shoulder. "Sir? Can you hear me?" she asked, her voice firm but calm despite the panic rising in her throat. The man groaned weakly, his eyes fluttering open. His breathing was shallow, labored. Emma quickly checked his pulse. It was faint, but still there. Okay, she murmured, partly to herself, partly to reassure him. "You're going to be all right. I'm calling 911. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed emergency services. While waiting for the operator to pick up, she kept talking to the man, keeping him conscious. "Stay with me, okay? What's your name?" "J. James," he managed to choke out, his voice barely audible over the rain. "All right, James. My name's Emma. Help is coming, but you've got to stay awake, okay? Just focus on my voice." As she spoke, she noticed how quiet the street suddenly felt, despite the chaos surrounding them. Cars honked in the distance, people rushed past, oblivious, but here, in this tiny bubble of crisis, time seemed to slow down. When the ambulance finally arrived 5 minutes later, a lifetime, really, Emma let out a shaky sigh of relief. Paramedics rushed to James's side, taking over where she had left off. One of them briefly thanked her before loading him onto a stretcher. Only then did Emma realize how soaked she was. Her hair clung to her face, her hands were freezing, and her once crisp blouse was now wrinkled and damp. But none of that mattered right now. She glanced at her watch again, 9:02 a.m. "Oh no," she whispered, her stomach sinking. Thorne Enterprises was out of reach now. There was no way she'd make it in time. All that preparation, all those sleepless nights spent rehearsing answers to potential questions, gone. But as she stood there, watching the ambulance drive away, a strange sense of clarity washed over her. Sure, she might have missed the interview, but she'd done the right thing. And maybe, just maybe, doing the right thing would lead to opportunities she couldn't have predicted. Still, as she flagged down another taxi, heading home to dry off and regroup, she couldn't shake the nagging thought, what if this decision cost her everything? Emma glanced at her watch again, 9:02 a.m. Her heart sank like a stone dropped into deep water. The interview was supposed to start at 9 o'clock sharp. There was no way they'd still consider her now. Great, she muttered sarcastically under her breath, pulling her damp coat tighter around herself. Just great. She flagged down another taxi, this time not caring about where it took her next. All she wanted was to get out of the rain and figure out how to salvage whatever was left of her day, and maybe her career. By the time she reached Thorne Enterprises, she looked like she'd been through a hurricane. Her hair was plastered to her face, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, and her clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin. She mustered every ounce of courage she had left and walked into the sleek, modern lobby. The receptionist, a polished woman in her mid-30s with perfectly styled hair and an air of practiced indifference, looked up from her desk and raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" "Yes, hi," Emma stammered, trying to sound confident despite her disheveled appearance. "I'm here for an interview with Mr. Reynolds. My name is Emma Carter." The receptionist typed something into her computer, then frowned slightly. "Ms. Carter, yes, we've been expecting you. Unfortunately, your appointment was scheduled for 9 a.m., and it's already," she glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:23. I know, Emma said quickly, leaning forward. But something came up, something serious. A man collapsed on the street, and I had to stay and help him. I called 911, stayed with him until the paramedics arrived. I couldn't just leave him there. The receptionist gave her a sympathetic but firm look. "Let me check with HR." Emma waited anxiously, pacing back and forth near the elevators while water dripped off her coat onto the pristine marble floor. A few moments later, the receptionist returned, accompanied by a tall man in a tailored suit. His sharp features and piercing gaze made it clear he wasn't someone who tolerated excuses easily. "Ms. Carter?" he asked, his tone clipped. "Yes, that's me," Emma replied, forcing a polite smile. "I'm Daniel Reynolds, head of human resources." He studied her for a moment, taking in her soaked appearance. "Look, I appreciate that you're trying to explain yourself, but punctuality is non-negotiable in this industry. Reliability is everything. We can't afford to hire someone who might prioritize personal matters over professional responsibilities." Emma felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and frustration. "But I didn't choose personal matters," she protested, her voice trembling slightly. "A man needed help, he could have died. I did what anyone should have done." Daniel crossed his arms, unmoved. "And yet, no one else here missed their interview because of it. I'm sorry, Ms. Carter, but we'll need to move forward with other candidates." Emma opened her mouth to argue further, but the words caught in her throat. What was the point? This wasn't going to change his mind. Instead, she nodded stiffly, thanked him for his time, and turned to leave. As she stepped back out into the rain, her emotions hit her like a tidal wave. Doubt crept in, gnawing at her resolve. Had she made the wrong choice? Was helping James really worth losing this opportunity? She wandered aimlessly for a while, replaying the morning's events in her head. Eventually, she found herself sitting on a bench in Bryant Park, staring blankly at the fountain in front of her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out and saw an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. Hesitating for only a second, she answered. "Hello?" Ms. Carter, a kind voice asked. This is Dr. Patel from St. Vincent's Hospital. You assisted a patient earlier today, a Mr. James Thompson. He regained consciousness a short while ago and has been asking to speak with you. Emma blinked in surprise. He wants to see me. Yes. If you're available, we'd love for you to come by. He seems quite insistent. For the first time all day, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end after all. Of course, she said softly. I'll be there as soon as I can. Hanging up, she stood and brushed herself off. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, and for the first time, she noticed a faint glimmer of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Hi, Emma said softly, leaning slightly toward the desk. I'm here to see James Thompson. Dr. Patel called me earlier. The nurse glanced up and nodded, gesturing down the hall. Room 214. He's been asking for you. Emma took a deep breath and made her way to the room, her mind racing. What could this man possibly want to say to her? She hadn't expected gratitude. Just doing the right thing didn't usually come with fanfare, but being summoned like this felt surreal. When she entered the room, she found him sitting upright in bed, looking much better than he had on that rainy street corner. His face lit up when he saw her, and he extended a hand weakly. You must be Emma, he said warmly, his voice steady despite the ordeal he'd been through. Thank you for coming. It's no problem, Emma replied, shaking his hand. How are you feeling? Better, thanks to you, he said with a small smile. I don't remember much about what happened, but the doctors told me you stayed with me until the paramedics arrived. You probably saved my life. Emma shrugged modestly, brushing off the praise. Anyone would have done the same. No, he countered firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Not everyone would have. Believe me, I know how easy it is to look away when someone needs help. What you did, it says a lot about your character. Emma shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially not ones that carried so much weight. I'm just glad you're okay, she said finally. But honestly, I should thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have missed such an important interview. The man chuckled lightly, then winced as if the movement strained him. Ah yes, the interview. Tell me about it. So Emma explained everything, the job she'd been hoping to land at Thorne Enterprises, the frantic race against time, and the crushing rejection she'd faced after arriving late. As she spoke, she noticed something flicker across his face, though she couldn't quite place it. Well, he said thoughtfully once she finished, it sounds like you handled yourself admirably under difficult circumstances. And speaking of Thorne Enterprises. He paused, studying her reaction carefully before continuing. My name isn't actually James Thompson. It's Richard Thorne. I'm the CEO of Thorne Enterprises. Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. Her jaw dropped slightly as she processed what he was saying. Wait, you're the Richard Thorne, she stammered, her cheeks flushing red. Oh my God, I didn't realize, I had no idea. Richard laughed gently, clearly amused by her reaction. Don't worry, Miss Carter. Most people don't recognize me without my suit and tie. But yes, I am who I say I am. And let me tell you, hearing about your actions today has given me a new perspective on hiring decisions. Emma frowned, confused. What do you mean? Richard continued, leaning forward slightly, that I believe we may have made a mistake dismissing you so quickly this morning. Your actions demonstrate qualities we value deeply at Thorne Enterprises: integrity, compassion, and leadership. So here's my offer, I'd like to give you a trial position within the company. Consider it an opportunity to prove yourself. Emma stared at him, stunned. This was the last thing she'd expected. But, sir, she began hesitantly, I don't want special treatment because of what happened today. I want to earn my place, not have it handed to me out of pity. Richard nodded approvingly, his expression softening. I respect that, Emma. Integrity is rare these days, and I admire your determination to succeed on your own terms. Here's the deal, I'll give you a chance, but you'll need to prove yourself just like anyone else. No shortcuts, no favors. If you can rise to the challenge, the job is yours. Emma considered his words carefully. This wasn't charity, it was an opportunity, one she couldn't afford to pass up. All right, she said finally, meeting his gaze with newfound resolve. I accept. But only if I'm held to the same standards as everyone else. I'll earn my place, Mr. Thorne. You won't regret giving me this chance. Richard smiled, clearly impressed by her grit. I already know I won't. Welcome aboard, Emma. Let's see what you're capable of. As they shook hands again, Emma felt a spark of hope ignite inside her. Maybe missing that interview hadn't been the disaster she'd feared. Maybe it had been the start of something far greater. The lobby buzzes with activity, employees rushing past with coffees in hand, phones ringing incessantly, and the hum of conversation filling the air. Emma heads straight for the elevator, clutching her leather portfolio tightly as if it were a lifeline. When she steps off onto the 25th floor, the finance department, a wave of intimidation washes over her. The interns and junior analysts are already hard at work, their polished appearances and confident demeanors making her feel out of place. She spots an empty desk near the corner with a small placard that reads, Emma Carter, and takes a seat, trying to blend in. Almost immediately, a group of interns approaches her, led by a tall, sharply dressed man named Ryan. His smirk is enough to set off warning bells in Emma's mind. So, he says, his tone dripping with condescension, you're the famous Emma Carter. Heard you got this gig because you saved the boss's life. Must be nice having connections like that. Emma forces a polite smile, though her jaw tightens slightly. I didn't ask for special treatment. I'm here to work, same as everyone else. Ryan chuckles dismissively, glancing back at his friends. Sure. We'll see how long you last when the real pressure starts. Before Emma can respond, their supervisor calls them into a conference room for orientation. As they file in, she notices Richard Thorne seated at the head of the table, looking every bit the intimidating CEO she'd met at the hospital. His sharp gaze sweeps across the room, lingering briefly on her before moving on. Welcome to Thorne Enterprises, he begins, his voice commanding attention. This internship program is designed to push you beyond your limits. You'll face challenges that will test your skills, your resilience, and your ability to adapt. Only the best will succeed here. He pauses, letting his words sink in, then adds pointedly, and let me be clear, no one gets preferential treatment, not even those who've done me personal favors. Emma swallows hard, feeling the weight of his statement settle over her. This wasn't going to be easy, but she hadn't expected anything less. Over the next few days, the challenges begin piling up. Emma is assigned tasks that seem impossible for someone with her level of experience, analyzing complex financial reports, preparing presentations for high-profile clients, and troubleshooting issues with investment portfolios. Each task comes with tight deadlines and little guidance, leaving her scrambling to keep up. Meanwhile, the other interns continue to mock her behind her back, referring to her as the CEO's charity case. Ryan makes a point of undermining her whenever possible, questioning her ideas during team meetings and dismissing her contributions outright. Despite the hostility, Emma refuses to give up. She spends late nights poring over spreadsheets, teaching herself advanced Excel formulas and financial modeling techniques. During lunch breaks, instead of socializing, she watches online tutorials to fill gaps in her knowledge. By the end of each week, she's exhausted, but also more determined than ever. One afternoon, Richard summons her to his office. The sleek, minimalist space feels even more imposing now that she's officially under his employ. He gestures for her to sit, his expression unreadable. "How are you finding things so far?" he asks, leaning back in his chair. "It's challenging," Emma admits honestly. "But I'm learning a lot." Richard nods, studying her carefully. "Good. Because I expect nothing less than excellence from you. Saving my life earned you a foot in the door, but staying here requires more than just bravery, it demands results." Emma meets his gaze steadily. "I understand, sir. And I won't let you down." As she leaves his office, she overhears two colleagues whispering nearby. "She's never going to make it," one of them mutters. "She doesn't belong here." Emma pretends not to hear, but the words sting nonetheless. Still, she squares her shoulders and walks back to her desk, ready to tackle the next assignment. Deep down, she knows proving herself won't be easy, but she's willing to fight for it. Every late night, every snide comment, every impossible task only fuels her determination to show them all what she's truly capable of. For days, the team had been struggling with a major issue involving a client's investment portfolio. A series of miscalculations had gone unnoticed until it was almost too late, threatening to cost Thorne Enterprises millions if not corrected quickly. Senior analysts were baffled, their usual strategies failing to pinpoint the root cause. Emma, however, couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they were missing, something small but significant. She'd spent every spare moment analyzing the data, cross-referencing numbers, and running simulations. Finally, just as fatigue threatened to overwhelm her, she spotted it, a tiny discrepancy buried deep within the financial models. It wasn't obvious, but once identified, it explained everything. Her heart raced as she double-checked her findings, ensuring she hadn't made a mistake. When she was certain, she printed out her report and headed straight to Richard's office. Though it was nearly midnight, his light was still on, a testament to his relentless work ethic. She knocked softly, then stepped inside when he called for her to enter. "Mr. Thorne," she began hesitantly, clutching the folder tightly. "I think I've found the problem with the Anderson account." Richard looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed in curiosity. "Go on." Emma placed the folder on his desk and walked him through her discovery, explaining how the error had compounded over time and offering a solution to rectify it. As she spoke, she noticed his expression shift from skepticism to genuine interest. This actually makes sense," he said after a moment, leaning back in his chair. "How did you catch this?" "I just kept digging," Emma replied modestly. "Sometimes it helps to look at things from a different angle." Richard studied her for a long moment, a hint of admiration flickering in his eyes. "Good work, Emma. Really good work. This could have been catastrophic if left unchecked." Her cheeks flushed with pride, though she tried to play it cool. "Thank you, sir. I'm just glad I could help." Word of Emma's breakthrough spread quickly the next morning. While some colleagues grudgingly acknowledged her contribution, others, like Sarah Mitchell, a senior assistant known for her ambition and sharp tongue, were less impressed. Sarah cornered Emma in the break room later that afternoon, her arms crossed and her tone laced with thinly veiled hostility. "Lucky break, huh?" Sarah said, smirking. "Guess saving the boss's life comes with perks after all." Emma clenched her fists briefly beneath the counter, forcing herself to stay calm. "It wasn't luck. I worked hard to figure it out." "Sure," Sarah replied dismissively. "But don't get too comfortable. You're still new here, and people don't forget where you came from." Emma didn't respond, choosing instead to walk away. She knew Sarah saw her as a threat now, but she refused to let it distract her. As the weeks went on, Emma continued to excel, earning more nods of approval from Richard. Their interactions became more frequent, often involving late-night strategy sessions or impromptu brainstorming meetings. There was an unspoken tension between them, not romantic, exactly, but undeniable. Richard seemed to respect her growing confidence and resourcefulness, while Emma found herself inspired by his vision and leadership. One evening, as they pored over a new project together, Richard leaned back in his chair and regarded her thoughtfully. "You've come a long way since your first day," he remarked. "I'll admit, I wasn't sure you'd last this long. But you've proven me wrong." Emma smiled faintly, touched by the rare compliment. "Thanks. That means a lot coming from you." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary before returning to the task at hand. Unbeknownst to Emma, Sarah watched the exchange from across the room, her jaw tightening with frustration. Whatever respect Emma had earned only fueled Sarah's determination to bring her down, and she wouldn't stop until she succeeded. "What are you doing?" Emma asked sharply, setting the documents down on her desk. Sarah turned around slowly, feigning innocence. "Oh, just looking for some reports I thought might be here. You know how disorganized this place can get." Emma narrowed her eyes but didn't press further. Instead, she tidied up her workspace, keeping one eye on Sarah as she left. Something felt off. Later that day, chaos erupted in the office. A major accounting error had been discovered, a discrepancy so glaring it threatened to derail a multi-million-dollar deal with one of Thorne Enterprises' biggest clients. The mistake traced back to Emma's workstation, or at least that's what the evidence suggested. Richard called an emergency meeting, his expression grim as he addressed the team. "This is unacceptable," he said, slamming a folder onto the conference table. "Someone made a critical error, and now we're facing serious consequences. Whoever is responsible needs to step forward immediately." All eyes turned to Emma, who sat frozen in her seat. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, accusations hanging thick in the air. "I didn't do this," she insisted, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "I swear, someone must have tampered with my files." Ryan smirked from across the table. "Convenient excuse, don't you think? Maybe saving the boss's life doesn't cover all your mistakes." Emma clenched her fists under the table, biting back a retort. She knew arguing wouldn't help, not until she had proof. After the meeting, Emma retreated to her desk, determined to clear her name. She combed through every file, retracing her steps over the past few days. Hours passed, and frustration mounted, but then she noticed something peculiar, a single line of code embedded in one of the spreadsheets. It was subtle, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Her heart raced as she followed the digital trail. The code led her straight to Sarah's login credentials. Armed with the evidence, Emma marched into Richard's office unannounced. He looked up from his desk, surprised by her sudden entrance. "Mr. Thorne, I need to show you something," she said urgently, placing her laptop in front of him. She walked him through her findings, showing how Sarah had manipulated the data to frame her. Richard listened intently, his expression darkening with each revelation. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" "Yes," Emma replied firmly. "And if you check the system logs, you'll see the timestamp matches Sarah's access." Richard nodded, his jaw tightening. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Leave the rest to me." That evening, Richard confronted Sarah in private. Though their conversation remained behind closed doors, rumors spread quickly throughout the office. By morning, Sarah had been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. Despite the resolution, whispers of doubt still lingered among some colleagues. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that not everyone believed her innocence. But Richard's unwavering support meant everything. "You handled this with integrity," he told her later that week during a quiet moment in his office. "Not many people would have stayed calm under such scrutiny. I trust you, Emma, and that trust isn't given lightly." His words bolstered her confidence, reminding her why she'd fought so hard to prove herself. A few days later, Richard assigned Emma a pivotal role in negotiating the very deal that had nearly been derailed. It was a high-stakes assignment, one typically reserved for senior executives. "Consider this your chance to shine," he said, handing her a thick binder filled with research materials. "We're counting on you." Emma accepted the challenge with determination, knowing this was her opportunity to silence any lingering doubts once and for all. She takes a deep breath, repeating her mantra under her breath, "You've got this." With one last glance at her reflection, she steps out of the restroom and heads toward the conference room where the investors are waiting. Inside, the atmosphere is electric. A group of impeccably dressed executives sits around the sleek mahogany table, their expressions unreadable as they sip coffee and review documents. Richard stands near the head of the table, his presence commanding yet reassuring. He gives Emma a subtle nod as she enters, signaling his confidence in her. Emma places her laptop on the podium and begins her presentation. Her voice starts steady, though she can feel her pulse racing beneath her skin. She walks the investors through her meticulously crafted financial strategy, highlighting cost-saving measures, growth projections, and risk mitigation plans. Each slide reinforces her argument, showcasing both her analytical skills and creative problem-solving abilities. As she speaks, she notices a few skeptical glances from the investors, particularly from an older man named Mr. Grayson, who seems determined to find fault. When he interrupts her mid-presentation with a pointed question about potential market volatility, Emma doesn't falter. "That's a valid concern," she replies calmly, pulling up additional data on the screen. "However, our hedging strategies account for these fluctuations, ensuring stability even during uncertain times. Here's how." She dives into the specifics, her explanations clear and concise. By the time she finishes answering, Mr. Grayson nods grudgingly, impressed despite himself. The tension in the room builds as Emma reaches the final section of her presentation, a bold proposal for expanding the company's reach into emerging markets. It's a risky move, but she backs it up with solid research and compelling case studies. "This isn't just about short-term gains," she concludes passionately. "It's about positioning Thorne Enterprises as a global leader for years to come. And I believe we have the vision, and the team, to make it happen." For a moment, silence fills the room. Then, slowly, applause breaks out. The investors exchange approving glances, murmuring amongst themselves. Even Mr. Grayson offers a reluctant smile. Richard rises from his seat, clapping along with the others. His pride is evident as he steps forward to shake hands with the lead investor. "Thank you all for your trust," he says warmly. "I think we can agree that Ms. Carter has delivered a game-changing proposal today." After the meeting adjourns, Emma lingers behind, still processing what just happened. Had she really pulled it off? Before she can dwell too long, Richard approaches her, his expression softer than usual. "You were brilliant," he says simply, his tone carrying more warmth than she'd ever heard from him before. "That deal wouldn't have gone through without you." Emma smiles, relief washing over her. "Thank you for believing in me, sir. I couldn't have done it without your support." Richard shakes his head slightly. "No, Emma. This was all you. You've proven yourself beyond any doubt." He pauses, then adds, "Which is why I'm promoting you to my executive assistant effective immediately. You've earned your place here." Emma's eyes widen in shock. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he replies with a small chuckle. "Consider it official recognition of everything you've accomplished, and a promise of more opportunities to come." Tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinks them away, overwhelmed by gratitude and pride. For months, she'd fought tooth and nail to prove herself in a world that seemed determined to shut her out. Now, standing here with Richard's endorsement and the respect of her peers, she knows she's finally arrived. As they leave the conference room together, the weight of her journey settles over her, not as a burden, but as proof of her resilience. She's no longer the woman who hesitated outside those glass doors on her first day. She's Emma Carter, trusted advisor and rising star at Thorne Enterprises. "Let's go over these numbers one more time," Richard says, breaking the silence. His voice is calm but tinged with exhaustion. Emma nods, pulling up the relevant spreadsheets on her laptop. "All right. If we adjust the valuation multiple here," she points to a specific figure on the screen, explaining how it impacts their offer. Richard leans closer, his attention fully focused on her explanation. For a moment, their shoulders brush accidentally, and both freeze, startled by the unexpected contact. Emma quickly pulls back, clearing her throat as she tries to mask her discomfort. "Right, so, this adjustment should give us a stronger negotiating position," she continues, her voice slightly higher than usual. Richard straightens up, nodding slowly. "Good catch. You always seem to see what others miss." There's an awkward pause between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city below. Over the past few weeks, moments like this have become more frequent, small interactions that blur the line between professional respect and something deeper. Emma has noticed the way Richard looks at her sometimes, his gaze lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. And she can't deny the flutter in her chest whenever he compliments her work or shares a rare smile meant only for her. But she pushes those thoughts aside, reminding herself of the boundaries they must maintain. This isn't some romantic drama, it's real life, and she can't afford to jeopardize everything she's worked so hard to achieve. Later that evening, after most of the staff has gone home, Emma finds herself alone in the break room making coffee. Richard walks in unexpectedly, catching her off guard. "You're still here?" he asks, raising an eyebrow. "So are you," she counters lightly, offering him a small smile. He chuckles softly, leaning against the counter. "Touché. But seriously, you don't have to push yourself this hard every night. You've already proven your worth." "It's not about proving anything anymore," Emma replies honestly. "I want to do my best, for the company, for you." Her words hang in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Richard studies her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he says finally, his tone quieter now. "Someone who believed in doing the right thing no matter the cost." Emma tilts her head curiously. "What happened to them?" His gaze drifts toward the window, lost in memory. "They got burned. Loyalty isn't always rewarded in this world, but it should be. That's why I value people like you, Emma. People who care more about integrity than shortcuts." For the first time, Emma sees a vulnerability in him that he rarely shows. It makes her wonder about the man behind the polished CEO persona, the struggles he's faced, the sacrifices he's made. "Was it someone close to you?" she asks gently. "My brother," Richard admits after a long pause. "He died trying to protect someone else during a robbery. He didn't have to step in, but that's who he was. Selfless to a fault." Emma feels a pang of sympathy, unsure of what to say. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne. I didn't know." "Most people don't," he says with a faint smile. "But maybe that's why I see a bit of him in you. Maybe that's why I trust you so much." The admission catches her off guard, stirring emotions she'd rather keep buried. She forces herself to focus on stirring her coffee, avoiding his piercing gaze. "Well," she says lightly, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground, "if I'm going to live up to that kind of legacy, I'd better get back to work." Richard laughs softly, shaking his head. "You never stop, do you?" "Nope," she replies with a grin. "And neither should you." As they return to their desks, the tension between them lingers, but so does a newfound understanding. Emma knows she's walking a fine line, balancing professionalism with the growing connection she feels toward Richard. For now, though, she chooses to focus on the work ahead, determined to prove herself not just as an employee but as someone worthy of his trust. Her brow furrows as she reads the message. Unusual data transfer? That didn't sound good. She quickly pulls up the company's internal systems, cross-referencing recent activity logs. What she finds sends a chill down her spine. Sensitive files related to the merger have been accessed and sent externally without authorization. Emma grabs the report and rushes to Richard's office, knocking sharply before stepping inside. He looks up from his laptop, surprised by her urgency. "Mr. Thorne, we have a problem," she says, placing the printout on his desk. "Someone's leaking classified information about the merger. If this gets into the wrong hands, it could lead to a hostile takeover attempt." Richard's expression darkens as he scans the document. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes," Emma replies firmly. "And whoever it is, they're moving fast. We need to act immediately." Richard stands, pacing the room as he thinks. "All right. Start tracing the source of the leak. I'll contact legal and tighten our cybersecurity protocols. No one leaves or enters the building until we know what's going on." Emma nods and hurries back to her workstation, diving deeper into the system. Hours pass in a blur as she meticulously tracks each digital footprint, following breadcrumbs that eventually lead her to an unexpected culprit, Ryan, one of the interns who had mocked her since day one. She confronts him in the break room, where he's casually scrolling through his phone. "Ryan," she begins, her tone icy calm. "Care to explain why your login credentials were used to send confidential files outside the company network?" Ryan freezes, his face paling. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Emma snaps, holding up her tablet to show the evidence. "You've been feeding information to Sterling Corp, haven't you? They're planning to sabotage the merger and take us over." Ryan stammers, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "It wasn't my idea. They approached me, they said they'd make it worth my while if I helped them." Emma clenches her fists, anger simmering beneath her controlled exterior. "Do you even realize how much damage you've caused? This isn't just about money, it's people's livelihoods, their futures." Before Ryan can respond, Richard appears in the doorway, having been alerted by Emma earlier. His presence alone seems to shrink Ryan further. "Is this true?" Richard asks, his voice low and dangerous. Ryan nods miserably, tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne. I didn't mean for things to go this far." Richard cuts him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Security will handle you from here. As for Sterling Corp," he turns to Emma, determination blazing in his eyes. "We need to move quickly. If they think they can destroy us, they're dead wrong." Over the next several hours, Emma and Richard work side by side like never before, strategizing ways to counteract the threat. They draft press releases to preempt any smear campaigns, strengthen alliances with key stakeholders, and prepare legal action against both Ryan and Sterling Corp. At one point, exhaustion overtakes them, and they collapse onto a couch in Richard's office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered papers. "We might actually pull this off," Emma murmurs, leaning back and closing her eyes briefly. "We will," Richard assures her, his voice steady despite the fatigue in his features. "Because of you. Without your instincts and quick thinking, we'd be sunk." Emma glances at him, warmth spreading through her chest at his words. For all the stress and chaos, there's something oddly comforting about working alongside him like this, two minds united in purpose. But as their eyes meet, she quickly looks away, reminding herself of the boundaries they must maintain. Now isn't the time for distractions, not when so much is still at stake. By dawn, they've finalized their plan. Richard delivers a powerful statement to the board, rallying support and assuring everyone that Thorne Enterprises will emerge stronger than ever. Meanwhile, Emma coordinates with PR teams to ensure the narrative stays firmly under their control. When news breaks later that day, Sterling Corp's attempted sabotage backfires spectacularly, painting them as unethical aggressors. Investors rallied behind Thorne Enterprises, solidifying its position as an industry leader. As the dust settles, Richard approaches Emma in the now bustling office, a rare smile lighting up his face. "You saved us," he says simply. "Not just today, but every step of the way since you walked through those doors." Emma shakes her head modestly. "We did it together. That's what makes this place strong." For a moment, neither speaks, the weight of everything they've been through hanging between them. Then Richard clears his throat, breaking the spell. "Let's celebrate tonight," he suggests. "Dinner. My treat." Emma hesitates, then nods. "Okay. But only if you promise not to talk about work." He laughs softly. "Deal." Richard approaches her quietly, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder. He looks more relaxed than usual, the weight of recent events finally lifting from his shoulders. "You've been avoiding me all afternoon," he says softly, his tone teasing but tinged with curiosity. Emma turns to face him, forcing a smile. "I haven't been avoiding you. Just, taking it all in, I guess." He nods, studying her carefully. "You deserve this moment, Emma. Everyone knows what you did, how you uncovered the leak, stopped Sterling Corp., and kept us afloat. You're a hero around here." Her cheeks flush at the compliment, though she brushes it off. "It wasn't just me. We couldn't have done it without your guidance, or the team's hard work." "Don't sell yourself short," Richard replies firmly. "This company wouldn't be standing if it weren't for you." There's a pause between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Richard takes a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Emma, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago." She stiffens slightly, sensing where this might be heading. "Mr. Thorne." "Please," he interrupts gently. "Let me finish. Before anything else happens, I need you to know how I feel." He exhales deeply, gathering his thoughts. "When I first brought you on, I thought I was doing the right thing, giving someone talented a chance. But over time, I realized it wasn't just about gratitude or obligation. It was about you. The way you carry yourself, the way you care so deeply about others, the way you never back down no matter how tough things get, it's inspiring. And somewhere along the way, those feelings turned into something more." Emma stares at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't allowed herself to fully consider the possibility that Richard might feel the same way she did, but now, hearing him say it aloud, she can't ignore it anymore. "Richard," she begins hesitantly, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to decide anything right now," he assures her quickly. "I just needed you to know. Whatever happens next, I want you to understand that my feelings are real, and they aren't going away anytime soon." Emma looks away, overwhelmed by the weight of his confession. On one hand, she's thrilled, he's everything she admires, intelligent, driven, compassionate. But on the other hand, she knows the risks of pursuing something personal in the workplace. What would their colleagues think? How would it affect her career? "I care about you too," she admits finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But, we can't pretend this wouldn't complicate things. People would talk. Our professional reputations could suffer." Richard nods, understanding her concerns. "I won't deny it, it's complicated. But isn't life messy sometimes? All I'm asking is for us to figure it out together. One step at a time." Tears well up in Emma's eyes as she processes his words. For months, she'd buried her feelings, telling herself it was impossible. But now, standing here with him, she wonders if maybe love is worth the risk, even if it means navigating uncharted territory. "I need some time to think," she says finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "About us. About everything." Richard smiles faintly, respecting her decision. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As he walks away, leaving her alone with her thoughts, Emma leans against the window, staring out at the glittering city below. Her mind races with questions. Should she take a leap of faith and embrace what could be an incredible relationship? Or should she prioritize her career and maintain the boundaries she's worked so hard to establish? For now, the answer remains unclear, but one thing is certain: nothing will ever be the same again. Leaving Thorne Enterprises feels like cutting off a part of herself. This place has become more than just a job, it's where she found purpose, built friendships, and proved her worth. But staying means risking everything for a relationship that could blur professional lines and invite scrutiny from colleagues. She sighs heavily, leaning back in her chair. Her eyes drift to the framed photo on her desk, a candid shot taken during the team celebration last week. Richard stands beside her in the picture, his arm casually resting near her shoulder, their smiles genuine and unguarded. It's a reminder of everything they've shared, the challenges they've overcome together, the trust they've built, the undeniable connection between them. But it's also a reminder of what's at stake. Emma saves the resignation letter but doesn't send it yet. Instead, she grabs her coat and heads out into the cool night air, needing space to clear her head. Meanwhile, Richard paces anxiously in his office, unable to focus on the stack of papers in front of him. He knows Emma is struggling with her decision, and he hates feeling powerless to help her. His confession had been honest, raw, and terrifying, but losing her would be even worse. He picks up his phone, scrolling through recent messages until he lands on hers. After a moment's hesitation, he types out a text: "Can we talk? Please." Moments later, his phone buzzes with her reply: "I'm outside. Meet me by the fountain." Richard grabs his jacket and rushes downstairs, his heart racing as he spots her standing under the soft glow of the streetlights. She looks beautiful but distant, wrapped tightly in her coat as if shielding herself from the world. "You wanted to talk?" she asks softly as he approaches. "Yes," he replies, stopping a few feet away. "Emma, I can see you're considering leaving, and I understand why. You're thinking about your career, your reputation, all the reasons this might not work. But I need you to know something: I won't let you walk away without a fight." Her eyes widen slightly, caught off guard by the intensity in his voice. "I don't want to lose you," he continues, stepping closer. "Not as my assistant, not as the woman who saved this company, and certainly not as the person I care about most in this world. Yes, there are risks. People will gossip, and some may judge us. But none of that matters if we're willing to face it together." Emma shakes her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's not just about us, Richard. What happens when things get complicated? When our personal lives start affecting our work? I can't risk ruining everything I've worked so hard to build." "And what if walking away ruins something even greater?" he counters gently. "What if letting fear dictate your choices costs you happiness, not just mine, but yours too?" His words strike a chord deep within her. For so long, she's defined herself by ambition, believing success meant sacrificing love or vulnerability. But now, standing here with Richard, she wonders if she's been wrong all along. "Love and ambition don't have to be mutually exclusive," he adds, his voice filled with conviction. "We can navigate this, together. I believe in us, Emma. And I hope someday you'll believe in us too." Tears spill down her cheeks as she processes his words. She wants to argue, to cling to logic and reason, but her heart won't let her. Deep down, she knows he's right. Running away wouldn't solve anything, it would only leave her wondering, what if? "I'm scared," she admits finally, her voice breaking. "Scared of failing, of being judged, of losing myself in the process." "So am I," Richard admits, taking her hands in his. "But isn't that what makes this real? We're human, Emma. Imperfect, messy, and flawed, but capable of incredible things when we choose to trust each other." For a long moment, they stand there, their breath visible in the chilly night air. Then, slowly, Emma nods. Okay, she whispers, squeezing his hands. Let's figure it out together. A wave of relief washes over Richard's face as he pulls her into a tight embrace. They hold each other silently, the city buzzing around them but fading into the background. Later that night, Emma deletes the resignation letter from her computer. As she closes her laptop, she feels a sense of peace she hasn't felt in weeks. Love and ambition may coexist after all, as long as they're rooted in honesty, trust, and mutual respect. It's been 3 years since that fateful night by the fountain when she and Richard decided to face their future together. In the time since, they've navigated both professional and personal challenges with grace and determination. Emma insisted on setting clear boundaries at work, no favoritism, no public displays of affection, and Richard respected her wishes fully. Their relationship remained discreet but unwavering, built on mutual trust and admiration. Under Emma's leadership, Thorne Enterprises has flourished. She spearheaded groundbreaking initiatives, expanded into international markets, and earned the respect of colleagues and competitors alike. Her rise from intern to high-level executive is nothing short of extraordinary, a testament to her hard work, resilience, and vision. As she finishes reviewing the last document, there's a soft knock at her door. Richard steps inside, looking as polished as ever in his charcoal gray suit. His eyes light up when he sees her, and despite everything they've achieved, the spark between them remains as strong as ever. "Ready for the meeting?" he asks, leaning casually against the doorframe. Emma smiles, closing the folder on her desk. "Always. Though I have to admit, it feels surreal sometimes, sitting where we are now after everything we've been through." Richard chuckles softly, stepping closer. "You've earned every bit of it, Emma. No one deserves this success more than you." Her cheeks flush slightly at the compliment, though she brushes it off with a playful smirk. "Careful, Mr. Thorne. Keep talking like that, and people might think you're biased." "Let them think what they want," he replies with a grin. "They already know how incredible you are." There's a pause between them, filled with unspoken affection. Then Richard clears his throat, glancing toward the window. "Actually, I was hoping we could take a break before the meeting. There's something I'd like to show you." Emma raises an eyebrow curiously. "Something tells me this isn't about quarterly earnings." "No," he admits with a small smile. "It's personal." Intrigued, Emma grabs her blazer and follows him to the elevator. They ride up to the top floor in comfortable silence, their hands brushing briefly before Richard intertwines his fingers with hers. The gesture is subtle but meaningful, a reminder of how far they've come. When they step onto the rooftop, the view takes Emma's breath away. Manhattan stretches out before them, bathed in golden sunlight as the city buzzes below. A gentle breeze ruffles her hair, carrying with it the faint scent of spring blossoms. "This is beautiful," she murmurs, turning to face him. "Why did you bring me here?" Richard doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small velvet box. Emma's heart skips a beat as realization dawns, her hand flying to her mouth in surprise. "Emma," he begins, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "From the moment I met you, you've challenged me, inspired me, and shown me what it means to truly live. You've stood by my side through every challenge, proving time and again that we're stronger together. And now, I can't imagine my life, or my future, without you in it." He lowers himself onto one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Tears well up in Emma's eyes as she stares at him, overwhelmed by the moment. "Will you marry me?" he asks simply, his gaze locked on hers. For a moment, the world seems to stand still. The distant hum of traffic fades, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat. All the memories flash before her, the rainy morning when she saved his life, the late nights spent working side by side, the countless moments of laughter, struggle, and triumph. "Yes," she whispers finally, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you." Richard slips the ring onto her finger, then rises to pull her into a tight embrace. They hold each other close, the skyline glowing behind them as tears stream down Emma's face. "I love you," she murmurs against his shoulder. "I love you too," he replies, kissing her forehead tenderly. Forever. Later that evening, as they sit together on the rooftop watching the sunset, Emma reflects on their journey. From strangers brought together by fate to partners in every sense of the word, they've built something remarkable, not just a career or a company, but a life rooted in love, trust, and shared dreams. And as the city lights twinkle to life around them, she knows this is only the beginning. The lesson and call to action. Emma's journey is more than just a story of ambition, love, and resilience. It's a reminder that life's greatest achievements often come from embracing both challenges and opportunities. Her path wasn't easy. She faced rejection, betrayal, and moments of self-doubt, but she never lost sight of her values: integrity, hard work, and compassion. Whether it was saving a stranger on a rainy Manhattan morning or risking everything to protect the company she loved, Emma showed us that doing the right thing isn't always convenient, but it's always worth it. Her relationship with Richard taught us another powerful lesson: love and ambition don't have to be mutually exclusive. By setting boundaries, communicating openly, and trusting each other, they proved that two people can build something extraordinary together, both personally and professionally. At its core, this story reminds us that success isn't just about climbing the ladder, it's about staying true to who you are while reaching for your dreams. It's about finding balance between the head and the heart, and having the courage to take risks when the moment calls for it. If Emma's journey inspired you, make sure to follow this channel so you don't miss our next story. We're committed to bringing you captivating tales of love, resilience, and triumph, stories that will stay with you long after the credits roll. Hit subscribe now and join us as we explore more unforgettable narratives that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. Because everyone deserves a story that makes them believe in possibilities again.